The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace, but inside the royal residence, darkness seemed to have settled over everything. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, sat quietly in her favorite armchair by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Her usually bright eyes were red-rimmed, and she stared out at the world beyond the glass without really seeing it. William paced slowly behind her, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian carpet. Every few moments he would pause and look at his wife, wanting to say something comforting, but the words felt inadequate. They had received the devastating news just hours earlier, and neither of them quite knew how to process it. The call had come at dawn. Catherine had answered, thinking it might be one of the children calling from their boarding school. Instead, she heard the shaky voice of Maria Santos, their longtime housekeeper and friend, who had become like family to them over the years. Maria's daughter, Elena, had been in a terrible car accident. The young woman who had helped care for their children, who had brought such joy and laughter into their home, was gone. Elena had been just 26 years old, full of dreams and plans for the future. She had been studying to become a teacher, while working part-time for the royal household. The children adored her, and she had a special way of making even the most ordinary day feel magical. Charlotte would often say that Elena told the best bedtime stories, and George had confided in William that Elena understood his struggles with mathematics better than any of his tutors. Now, as Catherine finally set down her untouched tea and turned away from the window, William saw the depth of her pain reflected in her face. This wasn't just about losing an employee or even a friend. Elena had been part of their extended family, someone who had seen them at their most vulnerable moments and had never judged them for being anything other than parents trying to do their best. "We need to go to Maria," Catherine said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "She shouldn't be alone right now." William nodded, grateful that his wife had found her voice and her purpose. He had been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to push her before she was ready. They both knew that their presence might bring unwanted media attention to an already tragic situation, but some things mattered more than protocol or privacy concerns. "I'll call ahead," William said, reaching for his phone. "We'll need security, but we'll keep it minimal. This isn't about us." As William made the necessary arrangements, Catherine went upstairs to change into something more appropriate for a grieving visit. She chose a simple black dress, nothing too formal or attention-grabbing, and tied her hair back in a modest bun. Looking at herself in the mirror, she was reminded of other times when duty had called during personal moments of sorrow, when being royal meant putting aside your own feelings to comfort others. But this felt different somehow. This wasn't about royal duty or public expectations. This was about being human, about showing up for someone who had shown up for them countless times. Elena had been there during Catherine's difficult pregnancy with Louis, bringing homemade soup and sitting with her when morning sickness kept her bedridden. She had helped celebrate birthdays and holidays, always in the background but never forgotten. When Catherine came back downstairs, she found William standing by the front door, car keys in hand. He had changed into a dark suit, but had deliberately chosen not to wear any military decorations or formal insignia. Like Catherine, he understood that this moment called for simplicity and sincerity rather than royal pomp. The drive to Maria's small flat in South London was quiet. Their security detail followed at a respectful distance, and William had asked the team to be as unobtrusive as possible. As they navigated through the busy London streets, both Catherine and William found themselves lost in memories of Elena. She had started working for them when Charlotte was just a baby. At first, she had been nervous around the royal family, constantly apologizing for minor things and seeming amazed that they treated her with the same courtesy they would show anyone else. But gradually, she had relaxed and become herself around them, which was when they discovered what a remarkable person she was. Elena had grown up in a working-class family, the first in her family to attend university. She was studying education because she wanted to make a difference in the lives of children who came from backgrounds similar to her own. She often talked about opening her own school someday, a place where every child would feel valued and supported regardless of their circumstances. The irony wasn't lost on Catherine that Elena had already been doing exactly that, just on a smaller scale. She had made their children feel valued and supported in ways that went far beyond her job description. When George struggled with shyness, Elena had patiently drawn him out of his shell with gentle games and activities. When Charlotte went through a phase of refusing to eat vegetables, Elena had created elaborate stories about brave carrots and adventurous broccoli that made mealtimes fun again. As they pulled up outside Maria's building, Catherine reached over and squeezed William's hand. They sat for a moment, gathering their strength for what they knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of their lives. They had attended state funerals and memorial services, had comforted dignitaries and world leaders in times of crisis, but nothing had prepared them for this intimate, personal grief. "Are you ready?" William asked softly. Catherine nodded, though she wasn't sure anyone could ever be ready for something like this. Together, they stepped out of the car and walked toward the building, leaving behind the formal world of palaces and protocols to enter a space where they were simply friends coming to comfort a friend. The cameras would not follow them here, the world would not watch their every gesture, and for once that felt like exactly the right thing. Maria Santos opened the door before they even had a chance to knock. Her face was swollen from crying, and she wore the same clothes she had on the day before, as if changing might somehow make Elena's death more real. When she saw Catherine and William standing in her doorway, she seemed to crumble all over again. "Your Royal Highnesses," she began, attempting a curtsy even in her grief. But Catherine stepped forward immediately and wrapped the older woman in a warm embrace. "Please, Maria, not today," Catherine whispered into her ear. "Today we're just Kate and William, and we're here because we love you and we loved Elena." The simple words broke down whatever walls Maria had been trying to maintain. She sobbed against Catherine's shoulder while William gently guided them both inside the small flat. The space was filled with flowers from neighbors and friends, and Elena's presence could be felt everywhere. Her university textbooks were stacked neatly on the kitchen table. Her favorite mug still sat by the coffee maker, and family photos covered every available surface. William noticed a particularly beautiful picture of Elena with their children from the previous Christmas. She was helping Louis hang an ornament on the tree while George and Charlotte looked on, all of them laughing at something she had said. The joy in that photo stood in stark contrast to the overwhelming sadness that now filled the room. She was coming home from her evening class, Maria said, once she had composed herself enough to speak. She was so excited about her final project. She wanted to create a reading program for children whose first language wasn't English. She said it was inspired by working with your family, seeing how important it was for children to feel confident with language. Catherine felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. Even in her studies, Elena had been thinking about how to help others, how to use what she had learned in the royal household to make a difference in the world. It was exactly the kind of person she had always been, generous and thoughtful to her core. "Tell us about the project," William said gently, settling into a chair across from the two women. "Elena would have wanted us to know about her work." Maria's face lit up slightly as she began to describe her daughter's passion project. Elena had been researching different teaching methods and had even started volunteering at a local community center, working with immigrant children who struggled with English. She had developed games and activities that made learning fun, much like the creative approaches she had used with the royal children. "She said that every child deserves to feel smart and capable," Maria continued, wiping her eyes with a tissue. She used to tell me stories about helping Charlotte with her spelling or making math fun for George. She loved those children like they were her own siblings. Catherine reached out and took Maria's hand, and our children loved her just as much. When we tell them about this, I know they're going to want to do something to honor Elena's memory. Would it be all right if we helped make her reading program a reality? The question seemed to surprise Maria. She looked back and forth between Catherine and William, as if trying to understand what they were offering. You would do that? You would really do that for Elena? We would do it for Elena, and for you, and for all the children she wanted to help, William said firmly. Elena gave so much to our family. It would be an honor to help continue her work. They spent the next hour looking through Elena's notes and plans for her project. Her handwriting filled notebook after notebook, and her ideas were both innovative and practical. She had thought through every detail, from the age-appropriate reading levels to the cultural sensitivity needed when working with children from different backgrounds. As they reviewed Elena's work, Catherine was struck by how much thought and care had gone into every aspect of the program. This wasn't just a school assignment for Elena. It was a genuine mission to help children who faced the same challenges she had experienced growing up in a household where Spanish was the primary language. She used to practice her lesson plans on your children sometimes, Maria said with a small smile. She would come home and tell me about how she had taught Charlotte a new game for remembering sight words, or how she had helped George feel confident about reading aloud. She said working with them taught her as much as any university course, the thou. Afternoon slowly turned to evening, and neighbors began stopping by with food and condolences. Catherine and William helped Maria receive the visitors, and it became clear that Elena had touched many lives in her community. Her university professors came by to express their condolences and to share stories about her dedication to her studies. Neighbors talked about how she had helped their children with homework and how she had always had a kind word for everyone she met. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, pulled Catherine aside while William was helping Maria organize the flowers that kept arriving. That girl was special, she said quietly. She never forgot where she came from, but she was always reaching for something better. Not for herself, mind you, but for other people. She used to tell me about working for your family, and she was so proud. Not because of the royal connection, but because she felt like she was making a real difference in children's lives. Catherine nodded, feeling the weight of Mrs. Patterson's words. Elena had indeed made a real difference, not just in their children's lives, but in their lives as well. She had brought warmth and joy into their home, and she had done it with such genuine care that it never felt like work to her. As the evening wore on, William and Catherine helped Maria with practical matters. They made phone calls to Elena's university to inform her professors, helped organize the flowers and food that neighbors had brought, and simply sat with Maria when the waves of grief became overwhelming. I don't know how to do this without her, Maria confessed as they prepared to leave. She was everything to me. My whole world revolved around making sure she could achieve her dreams. Her dreams don't have to die with her, Catherine said softly. We meant what we said about the reading program. We want to work with Elena's professors and the community center where she volunteered to make her vision come to life. It won't bring her back, but it will ensure that her love for children and education continues to make a difference. William added, and you'll always be part of our family, Maria. Elena made sure of that. Our children will want to remember her, and we'll want to remember her, and the best way to do that is to make sure you're never alone in your grief. As they prepared to leave, Maria hugged them both tightly. For the first time since receiving the devastating news, she seemed to have found a small measure of peace. The road ahead would be difficult, but she wouldn't have to walk it alone. The next few days passed in a blur of difficult conversations and heart-wrenching decisions. Catherine and William had returned to Kensington Palace late that evening, emotionally drained but determined to honor Elena's memory in a meaningful way. The hardest task still lay ahead of them, telling their children about the loss of someone who had been such an important part of their lives. They had decided to bring the children home from school early, understanding that this news was, too significant to deliver over the phone. As they waited for George, Charlotte, and Louis to arrive, Catherine found herself walking through the rooms of their home, seeing Elena's influence everywhere. The reading nook where she had spent countless hours with Charlotte, the puzzle table, where she had patiently helped George work through his mathematics, the playroom where she had created elaborate adventure games for Louis. "How do we explain this to them?" Catherine asked William as they stood in the nursery where Elena had spent so many hours caring for Louis when he was younger. "How do we help them understand that someone so young and full of life is gone?" William put his arm around his wife's shoulders, drawing her close. "We tell them the truth, as gently as we can. We let them grieve, and we grieve with them. Elena wouldn't want us to pretend this didn't happen or to minimize how much she meant to all of us." When the children finally arrived home, their excited chatter about school projects and upcoming holidays quickly faded when they saw their parents' serious expressions. They had learned to read these moments, understanding that sometimes being part of the royal family meant receiving difficult news that required maturity beyond their years. "Come sit with us," Catherine said gently, patting the sofa beside her. "We need to talk to you about something very sad." The children gathered around their parents, with little Louis climbing into William's lap, while George and Charlotte flanked Catherine on either side. The family dog, sensing the somber mood, settled quietly at their feet. "Do you remember Elena?" William began, though he knew the question was unnecessary. Of course they remembered Elena. She had been woven into the fabric of their daily lives for years. "She was supposed to help me with my history project next week," George said, his brow furrowing with concern. "Is she sick?" Catherine took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Elena was in a car accident, sweetheart. She was hurt very badly, and the doctors couldn't help her. She died, which means we won't see her anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Charlotte was the first to speak, her voice small and confused. "But she was just here last week. She promised to teach me how to braid friendship bracelets like the ones her university friends make." Louis, not fully understanding the concept of death, but sensing the grief around him, began to cry. William held him closer, whispering soothing words while his own heart broke for his children's loss of innocence. George, being the oldest, seemed to grasp the finality of what had happened first. "So she's never coming back? Never ever?" "No, darling," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "She's never coming back, but that doesn't mean she's really gone. She'll always be in our hearts and in our memories. Every time we think about her laugh or remember one of her stories, she's still with us in a way." Charlotte burst into tears, and Catherine pulled her daughter close, letting her cry against her shoulder. "It's not fair," Charlotte sobbed. "She was going to be a teacher. She was going to help lots of children learn to read. Why did this happen to her?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable and heartbreaking. William and Catherine exchanged glances, both struggling with their own versions of the same question. Why did bad things happen to good people? Why was Elena's bright future cut short? Why did Maria have to lose her only child? "Sometimes terrible things happen that we can't understand or explain," William said finally. "It's not fair, and it's okay to be angry about that. Elena was a wonderful person who deserved to live a long, happy life. We're all going to miss her very much." They spent the rest of the evening sharing memories of Elena. George talked about how she had made mathematics feel like solving puzzles instead of doing boring homework. Charlotte remembered the elaborate bedtime stories Elena would create, always featuring brave princesses who used their intelligence rather than magic to solve problems. Even Louis, in his limited vocabulary, talked about how Elena would sing Spanish songs while they played together. "She taught me some Spanish words," Charlotte said suddenly, wiping her eyes. She said it was important to know other languages because it helps you understand other people better. Can we still learn Spanish, even though she's not here to teach? Us? Of course we can, Catherine said, touched by her daughter's desire to honor Elena's memory. In fact, I think Elena would love knowing that you want to continue learning the things she taught you. As they prepared the children for bed that night, each parent took extra time with their bedtime routines. The children needed the comfort of familiar rituals, and Catherine and William needed the opportunity to reassure each child individually that they were loved and safe. When Charlotte asked if Elena was in heaven, Catherine chose her words carefully, respecting the fact that their family held private spiritual beliefs while also acknowledging that different people had different ideas about what happened after death. Many people believe that when someone dies, the best part of them continues on in a place of peace and love, she said. Whether you call it heaven or something else, I think Elena is somewhere beautiful, and I think she's proud of how brave you're all being. George, ever the thoughtful child, had a different concern. Will people write about this in the newspapers? Will they take pictures of us being sad? It was a question that broke William's heart, because it showed how aware his son was of their public life, even in moments of private grief. We're going to do everything we can to keep this private, William assured him. This is our family's sadness and Elena's family's sadness. It's not for everyone else to see. Later that night, after the children had finally fallen asleep, Catherine and William sat together in their bedroom, processing the day's events. They had handled many difficult situations as members of the royal family, but nothing had prepared them for explaining death to their children, especially the death of someone so young and vibrant. They're going to be okay, William said, though. He seemed to be trying to convince himself as much as Catherine. Children are resilient. They'll find ways to remember Elena that bring them comfort instead of just sadness. Catherine nodded, but she was already thinking about the practical challenges ahead. There would be a funeral to attend, decisions to make about Elena's reading program, and the ongoing need to support Maria through her grief. They would have to balance their private sorrow with their public duties, ensuring that their children could grieve normally while also maintaining the royal family's obligations. I keep thinking about what Elena would want, Catherine said. She would want the children to remember her with joy, not just sadness. She would want us to find ways to honor her life, not just mourn her death, and she would want Maria to know that she's not alone. As they prepared for bed, both of them knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate the love and respect they felt for Elena's memory. The grieving process would be long and difficult, but they would face it together as a family united in their loss and their determination to make Elena's dreams of helping children come true. The morning of Elena's funeral arrived gray and drizzly, as if the sky itself was mourning. Catherine stood before her wardrobe, carefully selecting her outfit for the service. She chose a simple black dress with long sleeves and a modest neckline, paired with a small silver cross that had belonged to her grandmother. Today was not about making a fashion statement or representing the crown. It was about saying goodbye to someone who had become family. William was helping the children get ready in their rooms. They had decided that George and Charlotte were old enough to attend the funeral if they wanted to, but they had made it clear that there would be no pressure. After much discussion, both children had chosen to come, saying they wanted to say goodbye to Elena properly. Louis, at 5 years old, would stay home with one of their trusted nannies. "Mummy," Charlotte said as Catherine helped her with her black dress. "Will there be a lot of people at the funeral who don't know Elena? Will they be there just because we're there?" It was a perceptive question from an 11-year-old, and it touched on one of Catherine's biggest concerns about the I. Despite their best efforts to keep Elena's death private, word had inevitably spread. The media had been respectful so far, understanding that this was a personal tragedy rather than a royal event, but Catherine worried about turning Elena's funeral into a spectacle. There might be some people like that, Catherine admitted, kneeling, down to meet her daughter's eyes. But we can't control what other people do. We can only control what we do, and we're going there to honor Elena's memory and support Maria. That's what matters. The drive to the small Catholic church in South London was quiet. Their security detail was present but deliberately low-key, and William had requested that they use one of their more modest vehicles rather than an official royal car. As they pulled up to the church, Catherine was relieved to see that the media presence was minimal and respectful, with photographers, keeping their distance, and no crowds of curious onlookers. Inside the church, Catherine was struck by the beautiful simplicity of the service. Elena's coffin was surrounded by flowers, many of them bright and colorful rather than the traditional funeral arrangements. Maria had explained that Elena had always loved vibrant colors, and she wanted the service to celebrate her daughter's joyful spirit rather than focus solely on the sadness of her loss. The church was filled with people whose lives Elena had touched. Her university classmates sat together in one section, many of them wearing small pins with her photo. Neighbors from her community occupied several rows, and the staff from the community center where she had volunteered had come to pay their respects. Catherine noticed that several young children were present, undoubtedly some of the students Elena had helped with their reading. When Maria saw Catherine and William enter with their children, she immediately came over to greet them. Despite her own overwhelming grief, she took a moment to kneel down and speak to George and Charlotte, thanking them for coming and telling them how much Elena had loved them. She used to say that teaching you two was like practicing for when she became a real teacher, Maria told them softly. She said you asked the best questions and made her think of new ways to explain things. The service itself was conducted in both English and Spanish, reflecting Elena's heritage and the diverse community she had served. One of her university professors spoke about her academic achievements and her passion for education. A neighbor talked about her kindness and her willingness to help anyone who needed it. Several children from the community center, with the help of their parents, shared simple but heartfelt memories of how Elena had helped them learn to love reading. When it came time for the eulogy, Maria surprised everyone by asking Catherine if she would like to say a few words. Catherine hadn't prepared for this, but she felt compelled to share what Elena had meant to their family. She walked slowly to the front of the church, acutely aware that every word she spoke would be remembered, and possibly repeated. But as she looked out at the gathered mourners, she forgot about being a princess and simply spoke as a mother and friend who had lost someone precious. Elena Santos came into our family's life when she was barely 20 years old, Catherine began, her voice steady but emotional. She was shy at first, worried about whether she was doing everything correctly, concerned that she might make mistakes, but it didn't take long for us to realize that Elena never made mistakes when it came to the things that truly mattered. She paused, glancing at Maria, who was listening with tears streaming down her face. Elena had a gift for seeing the potential in every child she met. She didn't just help our children with their lessons, she helped them believe in themselves. When George struggled with confidence in mathematics, Elena found ways to make numbers feel like friends instead of enemies. When Charlotte got frustrated with reading, Elena created magical stories that made words come alive. Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued, drawing strength from the memories she was sharing. But Elena's greatest gift wasn't her patience or her creativity, though she had both in abundance. Her greatest gift was her ability to make every child feel valued and important. She had a way of listening that made you know your thoughts and feelings mattered to her. She looked directly at the group of university students, knowing that many of them shared Elena's dreams of becoming teachers. Elena believed that education could change the world, one child at a time. She believed that every child, regardless of their background or circumstances, deserved to feel smart and capable and loved. She was going to be an extraordinary teacher, and in many ways, she already was. As Catherine made her way back to her seat, she noticed that there wasn't a dry eye in the church. William reached out and squeezed her hand, proud of how she had honored Elena's memory while speaking from the heart rather than from royal protocol. The service concluded with a beautiful Spanish song that Elena had loved, performed by a small choir from her community. As the congregation filed out of the church, Catherine watched the faces of the people whose lives Elena had touched. There was sadness, certainly, but there was also something else. A determination to carry forward the love and hope that Elena had represented. At the cemetery, the burial service was brief and private, attended only by family and close friends. George and Charlotte stood close to their parents, holding hands and watching as Elena was laid to rest. When it came time to throw dirt on the coffin, Charlotte stepped forward and whispered something too quiet for anyone else to hear before, tossing her handful of earth. Later, Catherine asked her daughter what she had said. "I told her that we were going to make sure her reading program happened," Charlotte replied matter-of-factly. "And I promised that we would take care of Maria and make sure she knows she's still part of our family." The reception after the funeral was held in the community center where Elena had volunteered. The walls were covered with artwork created by the children she had helped, and several display boards showed the reading program materials she had been developing for her university project. Catherine and William spent time studying these materials, impressed once again by Elena's innovative approaches to teaching. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine found herself in conversation with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Elena's favorite professor from the university. "Elena talked about your family often," Dr. Mitchell said. "Not in a gossipy way, but because she genuinely cared about your children's education and development. She used to say that working with them taught her as much as any textbook or lecture." "We'd like to continue her work," Catherine said. "The reading program she was developing, we want to help make it a reality. Would the university be interested in partnering with us on this?" Dr. Mitchell's eyes lit up with interest. "Elena would be so honored. Yes, I think we could definitely explore that possibility. Her research was groundbreaking, and her approaches could help thousands of children if we could implement them properly." As the day drew to a close, Catherine and William prepared to leave with their children. Maria hugged each of them tightly, thanking them for making Elena's funeral feel like the celebration of life she had hoped it would be. "She would have been so proud to see how you honored her today," Maria said through her tears. 3 weeks after the funeral, Catherine found herself sitting in a conference room at King's College, London, surrounded by education professors, child development specialists, and community outreach coordinators. Elena's research materials were spread across the large table, and everyone present was studying them with genuine admiration for the young woman's innovative ideas. "What strikes me most about Elena's work," said Professor James Hartwell, the head of the education department, "is how she combined academic rigor with practical compassion. These aren't just theoretical ideas. They're approaches that have been tested and refined through real experience with real children." Catherine nodded, thinking about all the times she had watched Elena work with George, Charlotte, and Louis. She had a natural gift for meeting children where they were, rather than where adults thought they should be. "I remember watching her help my son with a particularly challenging math concept, and instead of getting frustrated when traditional methods didn't work, she invented a game that made the numbers feel like characters in a story." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Elena's former supervisor, pulled out a folder containing detailed lesson plans. This is what Elena called her Confidence Through Literacy program. She believed that children who struggled with reading often had confidence issues rather than learning disabilities. Her approach focused on building self-esteem alongside reading skills. William, who had been quietly reviewing Elena's notes, looked up with interest. She mentions here that she wants to create a program specifically for children whose first language isn't English. Was that inspired by her own experience? "Partly," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. But she also talked about how working with your children made her realize that even children from privileged backgrounds could struggle with confidence when it came to learning. She wanted to create something that would work for any child who needed extra support and encouragement. The meeting continued for another hour, with the group discussing how to transform Elena's academic project into a real-world program. Catherine and William had committed significant funding through their charitable foundation, but they wanted to ensure that the program would be sustainable and could eventually be implemented in schools across the country. "We don't want this to be just a memorial," Catherine explained. "We want it to be a living legacy that continues to grow and help children long after all of us are gone." Elena would have wanted her ideas to evolve and improve over time. By the end of the meeting, they had established a timeline for launching the pilot program. 3 local primary schools had agreed to participate in the initial testing phase, and the community center where Elena had volunteered would serve as the program's headquarters. Maria had agreed to be involved as a community liaison, helping to bridge the gap between the academic research and the practical needs of the families who would benefit from the program. As Catherine and William drove home from the meeting, both felt a sense of purpose that helped ease their grief. "I think we're doing the right thing," Catherine said. "This feels like something Elena would be proud of." "More than proud," William replied. "I think she would be amazed to see how many people want to help make her dreams come true." That evening, they shared the day's developments with their children. George was particularly interested in the technology component of the program, which would include interactive reading games and apps designed to make learning fun. Charlotte was excited about the community aspect, especially the idea that older children could volunteer to help younger ones with their reading. "Can we visit the schools when the program starts?" Charlotte asked. "I want to see how Elena's ideas work with other children." "We'll see," Catherine said carefully. "We want to make sure that our presence doesn't distract from the real work being done. This is about the children who need help with reading, not about us." Over the following weeks, Catherine and William found themselves deeply involved in the development of Elena's program. They attended planning meetings, reviewed curriculum materials, and met with teachers who would be implementing the new approaches. It was demanding work, but it gave them a constructive way to channel their grief and honor Elena's memory. Maria Santos had become an unexpected but invaluable part of the team. Her insights into her daughter's personality and motivations helped the educators understand Elena's vision more completely. She also served as a connection to the immigrant community, helping to ensure that the program would be culturally sensitive and genuinely helpful to families from diverse backgrounds. Elena always said that learning should feel like playing, Maria told the group during one planning session. She didn't want children to think of reading as work or as something they might fail at. She wanted them to think of it as an adventure. The first day of the pilot program arrived in October. Exactly 2 months after Elena's death, Catherine and William had decided not to attend the launch, wanting the focus to remain on the children and teachers rather than on royal participation. Instead, they waited anxiously at Kensington Palace for reports from Dr. Mitchell and the other coordinators. The call came at the end of the school day, and Catherine put it on speaker so that William and their children could listen to the update. "It was magical," Dr. Mitchell reported, her voice filled with excitement. "The children were engaged, the teachers were enthusiastic, and the parents who observed seemed genuinely impressed with the approach." George leaned forward eagerly. "Did they like the reading games? Did they work the way Elena thought they would?" "They loved them," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. One little boy who had been struggling with confidence actually raised his hand to read aloud for the first time all year. His teacher said she had never seen him so excited about a lesson. Charlotte clapped, her hands together. "Elena would be so happy." She always said that every child could learn to love reading if they just found the right way to connect with it. As the weeks progressed, the reports from the pilot schools continued to be encouraging. Children who had been struggling with reading were showing improvement not just in their skills, but in their attitudes toward learning in general. Teachers reported that children were asking to take the reading materials home and were eager to participate in the interactive activities. One particularly touching story came from Riverside Primary School, where a 7-year-old girl named Amara had been struggling to learn English after arriving from Somalia with her family. Using Elena's culturally sensitive approaches, teachers had been able to help Amara connect her own experiences to the story she was reading, building bridges between her home language and English. The transformation has been remarkable, reported Mrs. Jenkins, Amara's teacher. She went from being silent and withdrawn to actively participating in reading circle. Yesterday, she even volunteered to help another student who was having difficulty with a word. Catherine felt tears in her eyes as she listened to these updates. This was exactly what Elena had envisioned. Children helping other children, building confidence alongside literacy skills, and creating a community of learners who supported each other. By November, the pilot program had attracted attention from education officials across the country. Representatives from the Department of Education had visited the participating schools and were considering how Elena's methods could be incorporated into the national curriculum. Several other schools had requested to join the program, and there was talk of expanding to secondary schools as well. Elena's work is having the kind of impact she always dreamed of, Maria said during one of their monthly check-in meetings. She used to say that she wanted to help children all across Britain, not just the ones she could teach directly. Now, that's actually happening. William was reviewing the latest progress reports when he looked up with a thoughtful expression. You know, I think Elena would be amazed by how many people have become passionate about her ideas. She always worried that she was just one person trying to make a small difference. She never imagined that her work could touch so many lives. The success of the program had also created an unexpected bond between the royal family and the communities where Elena's methods were being implemented. Parents and teachers who had initially been nervous about royal involvement had quickly realized that Catherine and William's commitment was genuine and long-term. They weren't just lending their names to a cause, they were actively involved in ensuring the program's success. During one school visit in late November, Catherine met with a group of parents whose children were participating in the program. One mother, Mrs. Patel, shared how the program had helped her daughter overcome anxiety about reading aloud in class. My Priya used to pretend to be sick rather than participate in reading time, Mrs. Patel explained. But these new methods that Elena created, they made reading feel safe for her. Now she comes home excited to show me what she learned each day. Catherine smiled, remembering how Elena had used similar approaches with Charlotte when she went through a phase of reading anxiety. Elena believed that every child learns differently, and that our job as adults is to find the approach that works best for each individual child. It sounds like her methods are helping Priya discover her own path to loving books. As Christmas approached, Catherine and William made a decision that surprised many of their advisors. Instead of hosting their usual elaborate holiday party for dignitaries and officials, they decided to invite the families participating in Elena's reading program to a special celebration at Kensington Palace. Elena loved Christmas, Maria explained as she helped plan the event. She used to say it was the most magical time of year because it brought out the best in people. She would have loved seeing all these families coming together to celebrate the children's achievements. The Christmas celebration was unlike any event the palace had ever hosted. Children ran through the staterooms, their laughter echoing off the formal portraits and crystal chandeliers. Parents who had never imagined setting foot in a royal residence found themselves chatting comfortably with Catherine and William about their children's progress and dreams. George and Charlotte served as unofficial hosts, showing the visiting children around their home and sharing stories about Elena. She used to help us with our homework right here in this room, Charlotte told a group of younger children, pointing to the family's informal sitting room. She made learning feel like the most fun thing in the world. The highlight of the evening was a reading performance by the children themselves. Using confidence-building techniques Elena had developed, the young participants took turns reading their favorite passages from books they had discovered through the program. Some read in English, others incorporated words from their native languages, and all of them beamed with pride as their families applauded. As the evening wound down, Catherine found herself standing with Maria in the same room where Elena used, to help the royal children with their studies. The space felt peaceful now, filled with the echoes of all the joy that had been shared there. "She's still here, isn't she?" Maria said softly, looking around the room. "In all the children who are learning to love reading, in all the teachers who are using her methods, in all the families who are discovering that learning can be joyful, she's still making a difference." Catherine nodded, feeling Elena's presence, in the warmth and laughter that had filled their home that evening. "She always will be." Every time a child discovers the magic of reading, every time a teacher helps a struggling student find confidence, every time a family celebrates learning together, Elena's spirit lives on. 1 year after Elena's death, Catherine stood in the main hall of the newly established Elena Santos Learning Center, watching as dozens of children participated in reading activities designed around Elena's innovative methods. The former community center where Elena had volunteered had been expanded and transformed into a permanent headquarters for her literacy program, which had now spread to over 50 schools across the United Kingdom. The walls were covered with photographs of children who had benefited from Elena's approaches, testimonials from teachers who had implemented her methods, and artwork created by young participants in the program. In the center of the main display was a large portrait of Elena herself, smiling the warm, genuine smile that everyone who knew her remembered so well. "Mummy, look at this," Charlotte called out, pointing to a bulletin board filled with thank you letters from families whose children had participated in the program. "This one is from a girl who says she used to hate reading, but now she wants to become a teacher just like Elena." Catherine walked over to read the letter Charlotte had found. It was written in careful handwriting by an 8-year-old named Sophie, who explained how Elena's reading games had helped her overcome dyslexia and discover a love of stories. The letter ended with a simple but powerful statement. "Elena made me believe I was smart even when I felt stupid. Now I want to help other kids feel smart too." William was across the room speaking with Dr. Mitchell and several education officials who had come to observe the program's anniversary celebration. The conversation was animated, with plans being discussed for international expansion of Elena's methods. Schools in Canada, Australia, and several European countries had expressed interest in implementing similar programs. "Elena would be overwhelmed to see how far her ideas have traveled," Dr. Mitchell was saying. "What started as a university project has become a movement that's changing the way we think about literacy education." George was helping a group of younger children with one of Elena's interactive reading games, patiently explaining the rules and encouraging them when they struggled with difficult words. Watching her son, Catherine was struck by how naturally he had inherited Elena's gift for making learning feel supportive rather than competitive. "Elena taught me that the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else," George explained to one little boy who was frustrated with a challenging passage. "So when you help your friend with that word, you're actually helping yourself remember it better too." The anniversary celebration had drawn people from all aspects of Elena's life. Her university classmates, now qualified teachers themselves, had traveled from around the country to attend. Neighbors from her South London community had come to see how her legacy had grown. Most importantly, Maria Santos was there, beaming with pride as she watched Elena's dreams continuing to unfold in ways her daughter had never imagined possible. She always said she wanted to change the world one child at a time, Maria told a group of journalists who were covering the anniversary. "I don't think she realized that one child at a time would eventually add up to thousands of children. She would be so proud to see how many young people are discovering that they're capable of more than they ever thought possible." Catherine had been asked to give a speech marking the program's first anniversary, but as she looked around the bustling center, she realized that words seemed inadequate to capture what Elena's legacy had become. Instead, she found herself thinking about a conversation she had had with Elena just weeks before her death. Elena had been helping Charlotte with a particularly challenging reading assignment, and afterward, she had lingered to chat with Catherine about her university studies and her hopes for the future. "I want every child to feel the magic of discovering they can understand something that seemed impossible," Elena had said. "That moment when a difficult word suddenly makes sense, or when a story comes alive in their imagination, that's when learning becomes joyful instead of scary." Now, watching dozens of children experience exactly that kind of joy in the center that bore Elena's name, Catherine understood that the young woman's greatest gift hadn't been her teaching techniques or her academic insights. Her greatest gift had been her ability to see potential in every child she met and to help them see it in themselves. When Catherine finally took the podium to address the gathered crowd, she spoke not as a princess or a patron, but as a mother and friend who had been profoundly changed by knowing Elena Santos. "A year ago, we lost someone who believed passionately in the power of education to transform lives," she began. Elena Santos was 26 years old when she died, but in her short life she had already figured out something that many of us spend decades trying to understand: that learning flourishes in an environment of love, patience, and genuine belief in each child's potential. She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience, many of them children whose lives had been touched by Elena's methods. "Elena never got to see the full impact of her work, but I think she would be amazed and humbled to know how many people have embraced her vision. Teachers who use her methods, children who have discovered confidence through her approaches, families who have learned that struggling with reading doesn't mean a child isn't brilliant." Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued. "But perhaps most importantly, Elena would be proud to know that her work has shown us something essential about education, that when we meet children where they are, rather than where we think they should be, amazing things happen. When we replace judgment with encouragement, when we substitute patience for pressure, when we choose understanding over frustration, we create space for every child to flourish." The audience erupted in applause, but Catherine raised her hand to continue. "Elena's legacy isn't just about reading or literacy, though those things are crucial. Her legacy is about remembering that behind every learning challenge is a unique individual with their own gifts, their own way of understanding the world, and their own potential for greatness. She taught us that our job as educators, as parents, as community members, is to help every child discover and develop that potential." As the formal ceremony concluded and families began to explore the various learning stations set up throughout the center, Catherine found herself in quiet conversation with Maria Santos. The older woman had become a close friend over the past year, and their shared grief had evolved into a shared commitment to honoring Elena's memory through action. "She's still teaching us, isn't she?" Maria said, watching as George helped a struggling reader work through a difficult sentence. "Every time someone uses her methods, every time a child gains confidence, every time a teacher tries a new approach because of her research, Elena is still in the classroom, still making a difference." Catherine nodded, feeling the truth of Maria's words. "And she always will be. The wonderful thing about education is that it multiplies. Every teacher who uses Elena's methods will touch hundreds of students throughout their career. Those students will carry what they've learned into their own lives, their own families, their own communities. Elena's influence will continue spreading for generations." As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the Elena Santos Learning Center, Catherine looked around at the scene before her. Children reading with enthusiasm, parents celebrating their kids' achievements, teachers sharing strategies and success stories, and Maria Santos holding court with a group of educators who wanted to hear more about her daughter's vision. This was what Elena had dreamed of, Catherine realized. Not the formal recognition or the royal patronage or the media attention, but this simple, powerful scene of children discovering that they were capable of more than they had ever imagined. In death, Elena had achieved something that might have taken her decades to accomplish in life. She had started a movement that would continue long after all of them were gone. William appeared beside his wife, slipping his arm around her waist as they watched their own children participate naturally in Elena's legacy. "She did it," he said quietly. "She really did change the world, one child at a time." Catherine smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace that had been absent since the terrible morning when Maria's phone call had shattered their ordinary day. Elena Santos was gone, but she was also everywhere. In every child who discovered a love of reading, in every teacher who chose patience over frustration, in every family that celebrated learning as an adventure rather than a chore. The grief would always be there, Catherine knew. They would always miss Elena's laugh, her stories, her gentle way of helping the children see their own potential. But alongside the sadness was something else now: gratitude for having known such a remarkable person, pride in the legacy she had left behind, and hope for all the children whose lives would be touched by her vision in the years to come. As they prepared to leave the center that evening, Charlotte ran up to her parents with excitement shining in her eyes. "Can we come back next week?" she asked. "I want to help more children learn to love reading the way Elena taught us to love it." Looking at her daughter's eager face, Catherine saw Elena's greatest achievement reflected there: the understanding that learning was not a burden to be endured, but a gift to be shared. And in that moment, she knew that Elena Santos would never truly be gone as long as there were children discovering the magic of education and adults committed to nurturing that discovery with love, patience, and unwavering belief in every child's potential.